There we
TV
go.
or something in the back corner there?
I'm in a hotel.
Oh, do you mind switching that off?
That's a good idea. Where's the remote? Had the news on earlier.
Where are you?
I'm in Melbourne.
Okay.
So, and like much of the country, I suspect, I've been more than a little interested in the machinations in Canberra. So,
oh man, what a mess.
It's, Abbott coming out today. Well, the news.
What did he say today?
He can't believe he was in Perth talking to a Liberal Party thing, and then he was interviewed after. I can't believe what happened. I went into the party room meeting on Tuesday, and before I knew it, Turnbull was spilling his leadership, and set in train a whole series of disastrous events. And I just couldn't believe he was spilling his leadership. And I'm sure the country's going, "Are you serious, Tony? Just what, you want us to believe that?" It's outrageous. And for what? What's actually changed?
Well, I'm a student of politics. My dad was a politician. I had politics thrust in my lounge room every morning, every afternoon as a kid. And he was a local politician in Hunters Hill. He was the local member, the mayor, and Hunters Hill was in John Howard's electorate. So Howard used to visit, and he was a lawyer, and he went on to become a judge as well. So I was kind of in that world of political deals and deal making, numbers, all that sort of shit. And so I grew up with it, and and Dad was an independent, which was kind of interesting because he then said, "I'll play this group off against that group, and I'll maintain my integrity and my independence." And I learned a lot from him in that. He stuck a very independent route through his whole career, and he was a crafty bloke too. He knew how to get shit done. But what I find about Abbott is he's such a duplicitous liar, and for his own self-serving ends.
Totally.
I went to the same school as the guy, Riverview, Jesuit Catholic school. It was a bloody nightmare of a place in the 70s. And Abbott was then an asshole. He then went on to university where he invited me at one stage to become a part of Opus Dei.
Oh, really? Is that right?
And at that time, my heart was actually more in my two prevailing memberships, one of Sydney University Nudist Society, and the other one which was Jay's Society, the Joint Society, neither of which really chimed well with... So I said, "No thanks, Tony. I've got other things to do, mate, other fish to fry." And I went away for 25 years, came back and saw nothing had happened in this country, and I thought, "Oh my God, what's going on? What is the political gridlock that's going on?" And saw Mr. Abbott rise and further. And one of my best friends, actually, and it's kind of, I mentioned to you once before that, I came back to Australia really to deal with this child sex abuse stuff. And one of the key things that I've been lucky enough to deal with has been to deal with it. I've been so lucky. I can't begin to tell you how lucky I've been. And one of the things that's been amazing in that process has been the Royal Commission.
Yeah.
Which set me free. You wouldn't believe how important that was. I went to speak to Justice McClellan and I said, "This is what happened to me. It was this guy, this dates, da-da-da-da-da." And he said to me, "Do you want us to go to the police?" I said, "No." I said, "I'm going to the police." And 2 years later, I met him face to face in a court where he pleaded guilty and he was being sentenced. And I could say, "This is what you did to me. This is how much it's hurt me. And I really would value an apology from you." And he gave me an apology. which was remarkable after 40, and set me free because I could forgive him, which is insane. It's insane. And I went to speak to my dear old friend, just hear me out, my dear old friend, Anthony Albanese, whom I met day one at Sydney University when we were both doing political economics together. And I went to catch up with him because he mentioned me in a radio program, which was a bit unusual. And I went, what the fuck's that all about? And he was being interviewed about his biography. And it turned out that someone had written a biography about him, and that biography had talked about how he'd met this guy called MarkJones at Sydney University, who changed his life because Mark's mother worked for Sydney's best rheumatologist, and his mum was an invalid pensioner suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. And 5 years after I met him and introduced mum to his mum to mum's doctor, his mum was out of a wheelchair and dancing. And I went to see him we had dinner together about 2 years ago, and I told him about the Royal Commission and what it had done for me. And I said, I really want you to say to Gillard, I really want you to say thank you for the fact that you've done this, because that is probably, you've set so many people free, and here's what happened to me. And he said, look, I just need to say thank you for what you did for me. And I went, you know, two guys born in completely different places, brothers from another mother, you know, I mean, literally. And you know, that is what politics can do as well. So I see that, and I'm very close to Albo, but I just see what a completely horrible distortion field somebody like Abbott is. And he is just like, the quicker somebody sticks a bloody big piece of lead on his left leg and drops him off the bloody North Head and lets him go to the bottom of the ocean, the better.
Well, I think he's so two-faced, it's not funny. And his extreme seminarian views on things, it's no surprise to me that he, you know, was a member of Opus Dei at some point and things like that. The guy that managed or was the executive officer of the Royal Commission, Francis Sullivan,
right,
is my first cousin.
Francis Sullivan, isn't he the head of the Catholic Church's response to?
Yes, he is now. Yes, and okay. I have 45 first cousins on Dad's side of the family.
Right.
Dad was the second youngest of 10, and was assaulted by a priest in the confessional when he was 9. Yeah, right. There's no doubt. 7 brothers and 3 sisters. There's no doubt others were as well.
Yeah, sure.
And I remember watching Francis on television on the ABC, just reading out the numbers. Yeah. That's all he was doing. He wasn't reading out details. No. Just the numbers. And he was in tears. Yeah. And Francis is a very experienced Canberrian public servant / you know, commission administrator and things like that. He's heard and seen a bunch of stuff, but he's also quite a soft individual. You know, he's a pretty wonderful individual. And I'm watching this on TV thinking, man, if just reading the numbers is causing that, I don't know what he's read. But it won't have been pretty, and he's not a sensationalist, so obviously it's clearly evident. And the institutions in the Catholic Church, and I'm a Catholic, but the Catholic Church just has to own this. Yeah. You know, it has to.
In my case, it was not the Catholic Church. You'll be pleased to know it was my Scoutmaster. But you know, the thing is, and this is the thing, it takes average 33 years for a man to admit that he's been sexually abused.
Right.
I was 33 years to the day. It's ridiculous.
That's interesting. Well, and my father was 80 when he died, and he only told us in the last month before he died. That was
Simon, you're saying something that I really acknowledge, because I really think it's so incredibly difficult for somebody to allow the shame that they feel around it to drop down and just say, it's okay, I'm okay, I'm being held by people. And my dad only did that when I told him about a year before, when I got into the legal process, because Dad was a judge.
Yeah.
I told him, and Dad had Alzheimer's and dementia and all that sort of stuff. And I told him, I said, Dad, this is the story. This is what's going on. It was my scoutmaster and da-da-da-da-da. And he broke down. He was really emotional. He called me back the next day. He called me, I could count on the fingers of one hand the times he's called me in his life. And he called me up and he said, I've got to tell you something. I said, what's that? He said, it happened to me too.
Yeah.
And I just went, oh man, fuck. This has taken him, would have been upwards of 65 years for him to say that to anybody. And I went, all of a sudden the penny dropped, and his bipolar, alcoholism, blah, 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 all fell into place. And I went, oh, is that what's been going on here?
Well,
man, it's fucking full on, this stuff.
I feel like we're only just seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, Simon, we are. But you know what? One of the things I've done just before I started this course with Dent, I just got divorced because this has been a really profoundly transformational process for me. I mean, I've turned myself literally inside out. And my wife couldn't handle it. She found it too, she couldn't handle the change, and for good reasons, we decided it was better that we separate and then divorce. But what's really interesting about this for me, it was just before the end of the divorce, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said to her, she works with restorative justice, and I said, she was telling me about how difficult it is sometimes for the people who have been the survivors of some terrible thing to face their accuser and the perpetrator to actually say what's gone on. And I said, yeah, I know all about that, how difficult that is. And she said, and I said, oh, she said, would you be interested to talk to people about that? And I went, oh, yeah, I guess I would. And I went home that evening and I thought about it. And I thought, you know what I could do I could write a book about how could you go about forgiving the person that's hurt you the most. And I did. And I wrote a book. And it took me like 3 weeks. I just wrote it like that.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, that's downloaded now. And I parked it to the side whilst I get this business going. But my idea is, once the business is running in a year or two, what I want to do is create an NGO, charity, or whatever it is, but support for people who are in that twilight zone, like your father, like my father, like I was, who find it so difficult to just acknowledge what's going on and then go, okay, well, let's see what it's like to actually face down the person who's done it and then forgive them, because it sets you free. It's incredibly powerful. And I just can't believe that I held on. I was homicidal about this guy for years. I wanted to kill him. I really wanted to kill him. I didn't kill him. I can now kill him with love, which is completely insane, but that's how does that work?
Well, it's, excuse me, one moment, I'm going to cough. As a part of the workshop I've been running over the last 3 days, we have a boardroom group that we work with over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And quite a while ago, someone recommended a book to me. I'm an avid reader, and I had been talking about how Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, is almost the Bible for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But what fascinates me more about Think and Grow Rich is that he wrote that he published it in 1937. So he wrote it at a time where there were no other books for him to go and read.
Right.
He conjured up that whole body of work by interviewing people like Eisenhower and Alexander Bell, and he didn't go and read everyone else's book and then write something. And this person said to me, well, he's written a better book, you know. I went, oh, really? And he said, yeah, in 1938, he wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil.
The Secrets of Freedom.
And because he'd published Think and Grow Rich, and he had this kind of his own moment of despair. He was near bankruptcy, and he was thinking, how do I distill these secrets? Who would I interview that if I could interview them, they could give me the secrets? And he was thinking, 98% of the population are drifting. Yep. So what if the devil was causing that? And how is it the devil's controlling that 98%? So if I had some power where I could interview the devil and he had to tell me the truth, I wonder what he would say. And he wrote this. And his wife read it in 1938 and said, please don't publish that.
Right.
Because they will ostracize us.
Right.
And so he respected that. And it wasn't published until 2011.
Really?
And it's an astounding book.
What's it about?
He is interviewing the devil, and the devil's talking about how he controls people.
Yep.
And what he causes people to do. And what he does is the devil talks about 3 primary things. All he has to do is to get people to drift. And drift is, the only thing we have total control over is our thoughts and what we think. And so the way you get people to drift is you make sure they don't think independently for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then you combine that with what he calls hypnotic rhythm. But hypnotic rhythm is the pattern of doing the same thing over and over again every day, combined with a third thing, which is the element of time. So hypnotic rhythm on drifting over time becomes a habit. And before you know it, people are in a place they never expected to be. Yep. with levels of anger and fear and frustration that they never expected to have. And it's all because they didn't make conscious thoughts about decisions, actually, not thoughts. His thing isn't about control your thoughts, it's about decisiveness. And every one of the people that he interviewed during the preparation of Think and Grow Rich, the single common quality was definiteness of purpose in his language. Yep. Or decisiveness. So dominant thought principle. I'm going to make this happen, right? Dominant thought principle. And so he says what he does is he controls people with fear, and the 2 big fears are poverty and ill health. Yeah. So if I can get people to worry about that, then they won't take any action. And then in the book, he'll also kind of gets out of him the antidote to drifting, of course. And one of them is, it's a little 10-point plan, but number 7, recognize the truth that fear generally is a filler with which the devil occupies the unused portion of your mind. What a freaking powerful statement.
Well, what you've just described there, have you ever seen this book?
No. I'll make a note.
This is a book, and I'm just going to show you something. So this is called, can you read that? The
map of consciousness.
Yeah. And have a look at the bottom of the map of consciousness you'll see these frequencies.
Yeah.
Which are logarithmic, and you'll see the emotions that are next to them.
Yeah.
And you go into your consciousness towards the higher level consciousness, what the higher frequency is. So when they talk about high frequency emotion, what you've just described is what he's just described.
That's really interesting. Yeah. What's that called? Power versus
and this is the hidden determinants of human behavior.
What's
so
it
what
called?
this is
Power versus force.
versus force. This is so renowned lecturer, expert on mental processes, national TV experience, blah, blah. Dr. Hawkins is the author of numerous scientific papers and videotapes. In 73, he blah, 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 blah. He is a therapist and teacher, but basically what he's saying here is, and this is kind of what I find really interesting, because I've had to go through this internal transformation from what you've just described. That's what was, my life was literally, I was really good at hiding the fear and pretending everything was okay with a big smile. And I became really successful doing that.
Yeah.
I was a partner at PwC. I ran a business. It grew really fast. Everything happened. I could put my creativity into it. I loved it because it grew and everything was great. Until one day when my wife said to me, we need to go to Australia. And I said, why? We've got a great life here. We don't want to do that. No, that's awful. Arrived in Australia, got fired from PwC day one. Literally fired on the first day. I ended up going to a retreat. I ended up uncovering what is now the last 10 years worth of work. And the Royal Commission popped up and blah, 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 blah. And I've been kind of recovering inside of myself for the last 10 years. And the last part of that has been to kind of finish off this relationship with my now ex-wife and actually what was a codependent relationship where I needed somebody to wrap their arms around me because I'd run away from home into the arms of her and her family. And they were really lovely people.
Yep.
But there was not a loving connection between us and a relationship which could be developed further. So it's like, I had to admit that, and that's what happened. And so this whole thing for me, this Riskloop thing, is me starting from scratch. I got no money. I've given her everything. I've said, look, I'm giving you everything because I know I'll find a way to start this again. So you've got it all. I've got, I've literally, put your fees on my credit card. And I'm starting from scratch. But I know that I'm starting in a way where I'm operating from the top side of this and not the bottom side.
Yeah, makes all the difference.
And mate, that's why we're talking, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't be prepared to go and risk having to talk to you for a couple of hours, a couple of times in the last two weeks.
Yeah.
But you helped me immensely.
Well, you've just clarified something for me by holding that table up. Last time we talked, one of the observations I made to you was, rely on your facilitation skills to sell rather than the selling skills or the teaching skills.
That was so obvious. And I'm thinking, fucking hell, I've been a facilitator all my life.
Correct.
I'm really good at it.
Correct. And one of the things that I keep talking about with people with the models is the models themselves are powerful, but the models are really a representation of a shift from teaching and selling to facilitating. But rather than trying to push into somebody, extract out of them. And you teach and sell from the bottom of that chart that you just held up. That's kind of the realization that hit me when you held that chart up. You teach and sell the bottom of that chart. You actually can only authentically facilitate from the top of the chart because you're detached from the outcome.
Yeah, totally. And
what I really want for you in this, when you're standing in front of that client on Riskloop, what I really want for you first and foremost is for you to get this. Because once you do, the rest will just make sense.
And you know what you've just said then, the vision I've got for Riskloop is we're enriching our clients' lives and their stakeholders. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to enrich people's lives.
Totally.
That's what we're here for. I'm here for love and compassion. I'm not here for fear.
Correct. And wow, well, hang on, there you go. Almost every client, almost every client that you're going to meet or prospective client that you're going to meet is coming from the bottom of that chart in terms of their feelings about the internet.
I know.
They're fearing it, you know?
Totally fearing it.
And, you know, if you could, so this shift from fear to feeling fairly powerful is huge.
And that's why I'm using in the name of my book, it's called Market Power, not Market Force.
Yeah.
Force is the lower side, power is the upper side.
Yeah, correct.
You're coming from power, you're coming from a place of love and compassion. You're coming from a place of ineffable bliss, illumination, serenity, joy, reverence, understanding, forgiveness, optimism, transcendence. That's what predictability is about. It's not about, you know, anxiety, regret, despair, and blame.
Yeah. So let me give you some feedback on conversations I've had since we last spoke. When somebody's product or service kind of catches my curiosity, which Riskloop has, I can't help but sort of try and find an underlying principle to test.
Yeah.
Because it helps when I'm working with you, but also it helps me to test the thinking around the models. And so I've been saying to people, what if what we look at in the internet, like social media and what comes up on our browsers and our feeds and everything else, and viral trends are actually really just surface imagery? And then what if underneath that, it's a bit like a television, the old television system, what you see on the screen is just the surface imagery. Then underneath that, there are the mechanics of it, which is the TV itself and the tubes and everything else. But what if behind that, there's something that you not only don't see, but you don't even think about, which is who's controlling what's being pushed into that TV. And, you know, it comes to your house without any wires or anything else. And we don't ever actually question, well, we do recently, but, you know, when TV first came to Australia, and certainly through my youth, we never talked about the power that the television networks had to determine what we thought about every day.
And what you just said is what I would call, in those days, the bubble.
Yeah.
That was the media bubble.
Correct. And people go, wow. And I go, what if the internet was like that? And what if you could actually influence the thing behind it? You know, just nurture it. So that what it said about you at least was what you wanted it to say. And the common response is, wow. It's like, what if you could do that? so you know, I think the challenge is that at least in the first phase of the sales process here, and it's been really useful having the first part of the conversation we had today, because I think half of this is going to be the style and the meaning behind it that you bring to the table in selling Riskloop. And then the other half is going to be the models and the story that's told, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost a case of allowing companies to discover for themselves through your facilitation, actually that's real. You know, what you're saying notionally makes sense, but we also believe it to be real. So how the hell do we nurture that narrative, you know? So, but just testing it with people without talking about technology, because they don't actually know that something exists.
No.
But they wish it did. You know?
That's well, you know, I find that really interesting, Simon. And look, because I'm an extraordinarily curious man, I look at my brain, you know, that's the nature of my brain. When I first started to use this tool at Mets Ignited, I was kind of blown away, because I was firstly blown away by two things. Firstly, the integrity of the guys that developed it, because they are particular guys. They have a worldview which is around, we believe, you know, they love the web, as they say, but they love reality more.
Yeah, right.
We love the web, but we love reality more. And what you see is not what you get. And their whole thing has been to disavow everybody of all of the bias which exists and say, well, what is real and what's not real? Where is the power and is not the power? Let's not pretend that it's there. And everyone, you know, busy with likes and follows and fucking social media and everything. It's a bubble, Facebook. It's a bubble, Google. It's a bubble, Channel 7 in 1965. It was a bubble, the Channel 7 bubble. There's the ABC bubble. There are the various bubbles, but who has the most power in the internet world? Well, that's a different world, but you can measure the power.
It's really interesting. You know, we had a personal experience of this over the last sort of 48 hours. My sister-in-law is a very senior, very experienced cabin manager with Jetstar.
Right.
And there's been a news story on a social media fitness blogger who's very popular has gone onto her blog saying, "Oh, it's so disgusting. Look, you know, a little video of her without a makeup on and everything. You know, I've just gotten back from Bali flying with Jetstar, and you know, I wear active gear all the time into business class, and I know it's business class, but you know, I'm in a fortunate position to be able to fly business class. And I had a little bit of my midriff showing, like 2 centimeters, and
What, sorry?
2 centimeters of her midriff showing because she's wearing a crop top and yoga pants.
Right.
And you know, and the cabin manager rolled her eyes at me and told me I was not suitably dressed and I'd have to put my jacket on. And then later on, when I was, you know, walking my little 2-year-old up and down the aisle, you know, she told me off again. And of course, social media's going off. Oh, that's dreadful and everything else. And of course, the cabin manager is my sister-in-law.
Right.
And Carmel says, "Do you want to know the real story?" her and her husband coming back from Bali, and he's got board shorts on and thongs and a t-shirt with his cap backwards, and she's wearing a crop top and yoga pants going into business class. Not suitable. And the 2-year-old that was being walked up and down the aisle was actually holding her hands, jumping up and down on the emergency chute on the door.
Right.
When she's going, that's not really the right thing to do. And what actually happened was, as she was walking the plane, come and said, would you mind just slipping a shirt over the top of that? No, that was it. So the bubble, of course, is so far removed from reality, it's not funny. And companies need Riskloop for what it does. But interestingly, in selling this, one of the things that might come from this, and it hit me when I was reading Napoleon Hill's work, one of the byproducts of this is the potential that Riskloop as a technical product will inadvertently also change the way executives in large companies think and make decisions.
Of course it is.
And so it must. So there's a bigger game that will end up being played, but the product's got to get sold first.
Exactly.
So let's get down to models. I said, you know,
Can I share with you the experience I had the other day with Rio?
With who?
Rio.
Yep.
So what I want to show you, actually, I'm just going to put my my iPad up on the screen, if that's okay.
Yep.
Let me just. Can you let me share the screen?
You should be able to. As long as I'm not sharing, you should be able to share.
I said, yeah. I said, share the screen. Okay. I will, let me see.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hang on, what's happening?
You good? Can you see?
I'm not sure. It's saying. Just let me. No, I don't know that I can. You might have to share again.
Okay. Let me
No.
just. I'll switch off my. Okay, I'll go back to Apple TV.
No, you might have to stop screen share in Zoom and then just do it again.
Wait a sec. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Oh. No, you should be able to hear me.
I can't hear you.
What's happened? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry.
So I've lost the window for some reason. When you went to school, I lost the window.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Something weird happened there. I'm going to try mirroring it again. Wait a sec.
Nah, nothing's happening.
No, it's not working on my end yet. Wait a sec. Let me try. I'll try plugging it into the computer directly. Wait a sec. Because I just want to show you this. This actually, there's been an evolution that's taken place in my head since the meeting. But look, the meeting went really well, by the way.
Good.
Which is a relief. I was really nervous about it. Oh my God. I'm bloody nervous about it, actually. Let's see. Right, so what are we doing here? We're doing new share, phone by iPad.
By cable, I think.
By cable, yeah, by cable, share. It keeps coming up with my...
Just stop the screen share altogether. Rather than do new share, stop the screen share altogether.
Stop share?
Yep.
Yeah.
The window hasn't come back up again.
Okay, so at the moment, all I'm doing is what we were doing before. I'm not sharing anything.
Yeah, but the actual Zoom window hasn't come back up at all, and it should come back up when we share. Wonder what's happened.
Should we just go into the Zoom session again?
Pardon?
Restart the Zoom session?
I think we might. I think I'll
That's okay. Let's do that.
I've just got to find out how to end the Zoom session without the window.
Well, you hit save on your end of the recording as well, and I'll hit leave the meeting at my end.
I actually don't have any controls. Hang on. Let me just see. Okay, I'll stop recording. See if you can share with the cable.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Good. Fantastic, thank you. So let me show you just, first of all, the slides that I used for the session. So I started off, I used this one first.
Yeah.
And they decided that they were conventional.
Which is probably about right.
Probably about right.
They're probably fragmented, but we,
let's not go there in a minute. And I'm going to come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
The next thing I did was I showed them this one, and they at first when I talked about market power, they went, "Oh, we've got to be careful about antitrust."
Ah.
And I went, well, and of course, if you're Rio Tinto, that's something that is something you do need to be careful of. But I said, of course, guys, we are not talking about antitrust. We're talking about you understanding the existing current reality online. Oh, okay. So, and what is that? Well, I went and described it here, but it was an interesting pickup that they had.
So just a quick thought for a side note.
Yep.
One moment. Does it you just need to click trust on something on your iPad, maybe?
It's not.
No, I think that's on your iPad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Oh no, it's on. No, it's not on my iPad.
So just click back on the Zoom again. So you're back in the Zoom program, and that'll go to the background. So what that is when you plug your iPad into the computer, iTunes starts up automatically, and that wants to get you to the iPad to trust the computer and vice versa,
right?
Which is not necessary for Zoom to work. So what happens when you plug your iPad in? iTunes automatically kicks off. But obviously when we get back into the Zoom program, it just sits over the top. Okay. Side note, I don't want to take any time talking about it because I don't want to get you out of flow. But I wonder if it's something about market narrative power to get past the antitrust thing.
Well, when I described market power to them, I said getting insight around the current narrative and how to influence the current narrative and engage people in the current narrative. That's what market power is.
Yeah.
But and that was no problem, but it was just the first thing that their heads went to because they go risk.
Yeah, so I wonder if in the book title that's going to be a problem.
It's only a problem if we don't define it very soon.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yep.
And that's the difference between power and force. So coming back to,
So as soon as you did that, they got that.
Yeah. Fine.
And did they want it?
Well, it's kind of like coming back to the myth. Is that possible?
Yeah, right.
And if you say, well, here it is, and then they go, oh, right, okay, well, right, okay, so I guess it is possible. Is that possible? So there is a thing going on in their heads around, is this possible? So there's a lot of doubt and fear and concern and,
Can I ask if in that moment they had realized not only is it possible, but it's here, would they want it?
I'm assuming they would because they've said that they want to keep talking. So
yeah. So what we're looking for at the base of the iceberg is that kind of conundrum in their head, because the base of the iceberg needs to be transformational, which means it's going to have that spinning for a moment, right? We never perceived that we could have even thought about having that.
Right.
But now that you've lifted the lid on it, it's all we can think about. And what if our competitors got it and we didn't have it?
Yeah, well, at the moment, nobody's prepared to jump because they're all too fucking scared. Sorry.
Well, because they don't. They need the proof now.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, keep rolling.
That went quite well, and then the next one that I found. Then the next one I did was I built up the market. The and I went down and I did it here. And this is what, you know, became the genius model.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, I think a whole lot of pennies dropped between the, you know, what is, if you like, what's your story and what's the story online? What is reality online telling us? And what is this intelligence gap, or when I described this to my partner, which I did the other day, my Japanese bass partner, I went through this with him.
Yep.
And when he saw this, he went, holy shit, that is really fucking clear.
Mm.
And I went, it is. And the next thing that I did was I discussed this with another friend of mine yesterday, because I came to this model, and we'll come back to the discussion. I came to this model and I said, you know, I use this the way we described it. And they went, oh, yeah. And then there was, somebody had to leave 15 minutes early. And I went, okay. So the only other thing that I left was, if you like, my product for prospects, which is, let's do an opportunity assessment, and I'd really like to talk to you about that. And that's as far as I got.
Yeah.
I didn't go into the rest. That was it.
That was with Rio.
That was with Rio. And what I've done is sent them a copy of the video that we made of the conversation, and sent them a copy of, well, I haven't actually sent the copy of the PDF yet, but the PDF is, my intention is to send them this PDF.
Yes.
And then I'll just finish off the loop here. So the next thing I did was I talked to one of my friends yesterday, and she looked at this and she went, wow, that's really cool. But she said, why do we have this, let me just find my pen. Why do we have this, this bit in the middle, this bit, she said, let's just get rid of that and just have the bamboozled, fragmented, conventional, and predictive. She said, can you line up next to that what those two circles look like? Because I can see whether or not I've got that. And following on from what my business partner in Tokyo said, I went, oh, so you mean something like this, where we've got bamboozled is I don't have any view. Fragmented is I've got some overlaps. I'm probably using, you know, social media, and I'm really stuck in the bubble of whatever bubbles I'm in, but I don't really know.
Mm.
Conventional is, you know, I'm doing a pretty good job, but there's still a gap, an intel gap in there, versus predictive, where there isn't any overlap anymore, where we've got complete coverage of what's going on online.
Yeah.
So that's what's come out of since I last spoke to you.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Does that make sense? Is that clear?
It makes total sense. Didn't we draw the circles on top of the bell curve on one of the previous meetings?
Never. But you know what? The thing that came to me this morning in a meditation was actually we need to start with the circles as the very first frame.
I think so. That's my takeout on what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then you go to this version of the bell curve.
Yeah.
And then you go, where would you say you are right now?
Exactly.
That was my most obvious takeout. If we talk about four futures, we've done it both ways. We've taken the timeline out, out of the middle in some cases. We've actually, for some products, we've done four futures as two futures, just green at the top and red at the bottom. The problem with that is it forces the customer to a very binary decision. Yeah. When you say, where are you? And we have put things out to the right-hand side of the boxes that contextualize the boxes even more. So I think as a flow to start with the Riskloop model or the Intel Gap model.
Yeah.
then go to this bell curve,
Yeah.
then, where are you on that?
Yeah.
Then really, really briefly, the iceberg. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time in the iceberg.
Yep.
What
would you say? You said this, the bottom of the iceberg is about transformation. What do you think is the key element of that for a world where, transformation in many ways is taking somebody from being wherever they're at to this place here. And it's more than just having an IT system. It's transforming the way we make decisions.
Yeah, it is. It is. So I think, and I would, it might be that we don't use the iceberg in the way it's traditionally been used, where we're saying, here's our product above the water. Here's our, these are the outcomes, de-risk strategy, et cetera. It might be the iceberg is in there as a model really briefly in the middle that says, so here's kind of what people are doing. People are operating in the visible space of the internet, what you can see above the waterline, which is really only 10% anyway, are really just almost waiting until they see it, which means it's already happened, and they're scrambling.
You just said something to me. Which is so interesting. It's just connecting. You just connected a dot, which I want to share with you. In the old days, in Channel 7, Channel 10, Channel 9, what were you trying to do if you're the proprietor of media? You're trying to attract somebody, eyeballs to your media, so that people sit within your channel, your bubble, and then you sell and advertise a space in your media where they can connect to those eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what you did.
Yeah.
Well, what's Facebook and Google done? They've created that same model for an online world.
Yeah.
Okay? So they've attracted your eyeball because they're giving you something for free. It's called Facebook or it's called Google search or whatever it is. And what they've done is trapped you inside that bubble. And that's fine, except for when something changes in the way they either one, run their business model, or two, run their algorithm. And then all of a sudden, if that is your only way to be in the marketplace, then you're totally subject to the whim of their algorithm.
Yeah.
And frankly, that is a really high risk strategy for somebody who is perhaps over here, somebody who's over here in the fragmented land, because what you're doing is, if that's your only connection to what's going on online, your Facebook ads campaign or whatever, then you're just sucked into that vortex, and there's not much you can really do. You've got no power. You have no power. You're powerless.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And you're always going to be fragmented and scrambling.
Yep.
What was the red one again?
The red one was bamboozled.
Okay. Let's just can you stop sharing screen? I'll share mine in.
Sure.
And I just want to examine the Zoom just doesn't want to. I've noticed recently Zoom's had, I don't know why, but it's had some interesting little glitchy bits recently. I'm wondering if it's a departure from treating the iceberg as a description of your product. But I wonder if it's a way of adding to the model's narrative. So if you start off with the Riskloop model.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you there for a second, Simon? I've tried to record from my side and it says that I need to record permission from the meeting host.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. You should be able to record now.
Great, thanks.
Right. So I think one of the reasons I like people to go out and market test is exactly what's happening. You know, you've gone and done a test, which is great, and put it in front of people. So I think we know that that model is the starting point.
That's a cracker. That is a cracker. And people get it. They get it straight away.
And so then it moves to this.
Yep.
And then where are you?
Yep.
And then it's probably, this is what, because the iceberg model is a what model. This is what it's really about. And we'll come back to that model in a minute. And then it's, here's how we do it, which is that one.
Yeah.
And then how long do you want to wait? And I'm totally fine with taking the middle row out. For some products it's necessary, for some it's not. But when we do it that way, you know, what we normally just put down here is, you know, it's time along there.
Sure. That's fine.
And it's a result up there, and you can be completely overlapped or, you know, same thing. So
like the circles coming back throughout this is...
Yeah, totally. And that's fabulous because it's holding them to that idea.
Yep. Yep.
So this is what it's really about, expressed through the iceberg as a different kind of model. We might say, look, well, you know, what a lot of people see of the internet is what's above the waterline. It is like an iceberg. It's what's above the waterline. It's really only 10% of what's going on, and it's generally what people see, which means it's already happened on the internet. And a lot of companies are bamboozled and scrambling in that space. Some people, yep.
Can I just, there was a quote that I got this morning from a podcast I was listening to, a guy called William Gibson.
Right.
American-Canadian writer who has been called the noir prophet of the cyberpunk genre of science fiction. And his quote was, "The future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed."
I love that.
You like that?
Yeah.
That's what I think is, you're explaining actually the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it is. That's actually an absolute observation out of what I'm talking about. I think there's real logic in shifting this model to still explain the what, and the what in the context of Riskloop, but more in the context of the customer and not the service itself.
Yeah.
And so then we're saying, you know, for a lot of people, it's what they see. It is like, you know, in the old days of TV with people sitting in front of the box watching it, you just saw what was on the screen. Behind that, there was a whole lot of connection and systems and algorithms. And there are companies that have tried to manipulate the algorithms. What that actually leads to is a fairly fragmented approach instinctively, because the people on this side only have to change the algorithms and you're fragmented.
Yeah.
And you're back to scrambling again. And this is the intangible. It's just below the waterline. This is the intangible approach to internet, which a lot of people have been bleating on about for a long time. You know, deep Facebook strategies and you know, custom audiences and all sorts of other things. And a lot of people are operating in ignorance of the fact that there's actually a transformational level of internet reality. And this is the level where, you know, the desire is to love the internet, but love reality more, which is actually, you know, the theme of Riskloop. And what do we mean by that? Well, the transformational level that sits below all of this sort of stuff is what we call market power.
Yeah.
But what we mean by that is really being able to nurture the narrative. So reality and perception, you know, match. And it's interesting that we put the word power and nurture together, and we can explain that more. But the people that are, what do we call the green, the people that are predictive and reflective.
We'll come back to the word reflective because my partner in Tokyo hated it.
Okay, well, let's come back to that. But the people at this level are the ones that are nurturing the narrative, almost irrespective of algorithms and structure, and certainly irrelevant to what people are looking at above the waterline, because what appears up here is actually really coming from the bottom.
Exactly.
And this is the space. That's what we're all about doing, giving you market power by nurturing the narrative. Is that actually something you'd be interested in?
Nurturing the narrative. I love nurturing the narrative. I think what you nurture the narrative is what we do.
Yeah.
But you've got to know what it is and where it is and how strong it is before you can nurture it.
Yeah. So, you know, is it worth looking at how Riskloop does that? Because it is transformational. It's not something people are kind of even aware of. However, we can do it. Should we walk through how that happens? And then you're into the genius model. I feel like, but this model, you'd walk through this pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a much cleaner way of thinking about the model than the previous version.
I totally agree. Can I just reality test this for a second with you?
Yeah.
If you think about people in financial markets, you know, people who are subject to the rigor of financial markets.
Yeah.
Financial markets are brutal. If you've got to, you know, run an investment fund and you've got to invest in financial markets products,
yeah,
you don't have much margin for error. When you get it wrong, you get it wrong. You know, there is nothing that, you know, you may not like the market. It's a bitch, but the market is always right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I guess is really transformational is the fact that knowing that whatever is going on at any point in time, what reality really is. So going back to our two circles together, if you don't actually know what reality is, then you can never be subject to the force of what the market is telling you.
No.
And you can pretend that you know more. So coming back to our conversation earlier about fear and force, you know, you can pretend that your ego, your devil, is inside of you saying, oh, no, I can outwit the market. I'm better than the market. Well, I defy anyone to say they're better than the market. What they've got to do is work with the market.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is an understanding that most people don't have.
So how many people who are advisors have spoken about this software they've written to calculate the market, you know, measure the market, tell you exactly the right time to, to put or whatever. But but at best, they're operating in here.
At best.
At best, yeah.
And you can see why what we've done in the last year, 18 months, and that's why I'm saying this, is because we've done a lot of work on using the predictive capability of this in the financial markets, particularly around shares. And that's the reason for me being particularly interested in talking to investor relations professionals, because they do have to deal with the market.
Mm.
They do have to deal with the market when there's a crisis, when there's a big issue, when there's a reputational problem. Is Qantas worried about what, Mrs. So-and-so said on the Jetstar flight yesterday? Well, we can measure whether that narrative has any legs or not.
Yeah.
And if it's got no legs and power, it's just noise. It'll blow away in 2 days. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But if it's not, we can tell you.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, the iceberg needs to be, wow, the iceberg needs to be this version, not our previous version.
Yeah.
And, what part of the iceberg should you be most concerned about running into?
Well, what's really going on?
Yeah, well, what's going to hurt? What sunk the Titanic?
What was under the water?
Everything underneath the water, not the bit on top.
No.
And by the time they saw the bit on top, it was already too late.
Yep.
The iceberg, excuse me, let me mute this for a moment. The iceberg travels in the direction of the base, not the direction of the wind on the top.
Yeah.
I think this idea of, it's what is tangible on the internet, what you see, has already happened, and it's actually being driven by what is transformational underneath, which is the narrative. It's the narrative is what is transformational for a company, not the visual. It's the narrative.
The narrative and the power of the narrative reflects the reality in which the company operates, which is what's so terrifying. So it's a mirror of reality.
I think the iceberg needs to be like this, and if it's like this, does it make sense to you in terms of that flow? You do the Riskloop model, you do the bell curve. Where are you now? Hey, this is what this is really about. So the iceberg is still a what model.
Yeah.
Would you like to know how Riskloop can help you nurture the narrative so that the narrative and reality overlap much more powerfully for you? That's a natural flow. And I wouldn't hang around for a long time in the iceberg. I would just put it in front of them for them to get it. Because the whole purpose of the iceberg is for them to make the mental shift from we've been playing up here and here, and now you're telling us we can have this, and we'd better have that before our competitors, or at least at the same time as our competitors.
Actually, I'm telling you, Simon, you can have that, and you can have it cheaply, and very effectively.
Yeah. And I think the other key thing about this model, so cheap, quickly, and effectively.
Oh.
And I think the other thing about this key model, so, you're saying your question was, where to now with Rio?
Yeah.
I think the important thing about this model, and you might go back to it after you've talked to them about, here's how we do it through the Genius model. You may come back to this and go, this will only be a concept for you until we do it for real.
Yeah.
So the ball is actually in your court now.
Oh.
We can step you through, we can show you the system, we can absolutely show you the technology. We can demonstrate all that stuff. And we can show you other case studies, and we can show you some landscapes we've prepared. We can show you some predictive work we've already done. We can show you a ton of stuff. But the only way for this to become reality for you, rather than a concept, which is obviously clearly interesting, is for us to do it for real. That means we need to, we've got to be in a relationship that allows a level of non-disclosure. We need to be in a commercial relationship, whether that's let's at least sign an NDA so we can take you through the system. I actually think you should be requiring a level of non-disclosure before you actually, lift the curtain.
Really?
I don't know that they should see it depends how much you're going to show them. Are there some simple front-end stuff they can see where they'll immediately get it that it's real?
They don't believe it when they see it. So, it's, frankly, that's part of the problem is it takes people, because we're so conditioned to live in a world where we just deal and we don't feel like we can ever understand how anything works.
Yeah.
When somebody actually shows you that and you go, I don't believe it's true.
What would they need to see to know that it's true? What evidence would they need to see? Mark, this is just, until I can stick my fingers through the wounds in your hands, I can't believe that you were crucified.
No.
So what are the wounds in the hands they have to be able to stick their finger through?
It depends on the person. If you're me, because you're a curious soul, then you just go, oh yeah,
But let's talk about Rio. What do they need? What do they need? What are the wounds in the hands for them?
Okay, here's the thing. I've been thinking that the people I need to talk to were the marketing people in organisations, but actually I switched in the last month, and it's been a deep insight for me to go, no, the 4 people who are the most interested in this are the chairman of the company, the CEO, who are trying to pitch the value of this company in the market, the head of investor relations, and the head of corporate communications who's supporting the head of investor relations. They're the 4 people probably the most concerned about this.
What about the CFO?
CFO as well, but they generally don't get the whole comms piece because they don't have to do it.
No, but they're always involved when comms create exposure for them.
They are. And they're also responsible for risk, which, this is about risk too.
Mm.
So it's that little group of people are the people that, we're talking about. Now, those people, for them to feel comfortable that this is doing what it says it's doing, you would expect that they would need a case study of investor relations, or what does it mean for I don't have one of those at the moment because I'm still prototyping it for investor relations as a product. And going to Rio is actually saying, look, I'm coming to you because what I really want is I want to be able to show you its value so that you can see it and feel it. And really I know once we've done what I've called my product for prospects, which is my opportunity assessment, you will have seen it operate in your organization for the challenges you've got. You will have measured those and will have benchmarked what you're currently doing versus what you could be doing and shown you what the difference is. That's the only way, and it's going to cost you 35 grand. Are you okay with that? That is the only way that I can show them properly.
Have you put that in front of them yet?
I put the idea of the opportunity assessment in front of them, and they said, look, that's not something that we would do. That's something that IR in corporate communications would do. So they would be the buyer.
Sorry. Who is that? Who you're talking to?
I was talking to, so I got into Rio through so I went to an Ostmine event. Ostmine is the is the industry association for mining equipment technology service companies that provide supply to mining.
Yeah.
They did a session, Rio did a session led by a guy called Alistair Matthijs, who's the head of automation and productivity automation for Rio, mostly mining focused stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went up to him afterwards because I asked a really impertinent question in the event. I said, look, for small companies like ours who've got a great technology, we just find it really hard to navigate internally in an organization like yours, yet we can create a lot of value. Now, it's taken me 6 months to get him to the point where he'll introduce me to people in his organization, and that was last week for the first time. So thank God it's taken him that long because I didn't have a story to tell. But I got it.
Yeah.
He then brought in 2 people, one from who's the head of strategic productivity systems for their internal consulting and growth arm. And the other, so they look at technology and new technology systems for Rio. The other was the head of communications for the internal consulting, innovation and growth arm. And she's linked into the corporate communications people. And they both, everyone agreed that it was her role to take it further. And I said, well, actually, where I wish to take it, where I would like to take it is with corporate communications and IR together. It's the 2 of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get to the chair and the CEO about it. So they're the 2 most likely, people that I could get to. But what I've got is an internal champion and coach.
Yeah.
And that's Alistair, and he's very positive.
What's his role again? Title?
Executive General Manager, Technology Automation. Productivity automation.
Right.
So he's about productivity, but mostly in mines, obviously, because that's where most of the productivity takes place.
And you haven't met with investor relations yet?
No.
So, and out of the meeting, was that talked about as a next step?
Yeah, so I called him after the meeting, said, how did it go? He said, that was good. Corporate communications and investor relations would appear to be the right place, the right address for you. I will see what I can do once I have a copy of the slides and the video, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I think you want a meeting with corporate comms and investor relations.
Yeah.
Beforehand. So you know the $35,000 product.
Yeah.
Which is what you want to do with them.
Yeah.
What's the hard cost of that up front?
Hard cost, you mean what? What do you mean hard cost?
Yeah, for Riskloop and for you. Are there hard costs? Out-of-pocket costs?
There's the 2 costs would be, one is using the system. We'd be running 100 narratives as a result of that, which is 100 US a narrative. So there's 10,000 US in narratives.
That Riskloop pays.
I would be paying 65%, or no, 75% of 10,000 for that. Yeah, for the use of the system.
But the guys from Riskloop. So you'd be paying that to the guys from Riskloop, right?
No. Significant systems get to pay 10,000 US for using the system of that 35,000.
Yeah.
Let's call that 35,000 US, not Aussie.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's 35,000 US. It's 10,000 of US is going to 6 systems.
Yeah.
And the other 25,000 is coming to me for the time that I'm going to spend doing whatever it is and wherever I have to travel to and whatever.
Yeah. So, but what I want to know is, inside that 35,000 US, what are the hard costs for you and SIG Systems? Money you've got to spend, whether they pay you or not, whether Rio pay you or not.
Travel and my salary, but maybe.
I'm trying to establish what would be put at risk if first time round, let's say you meet with them.
Yeah.
And if you say, let's do the study.
Yeah.
Then we review. And then you pay. What are you putting at risk if you do it in that order?
Well, Six Systems putting 10,000.
Yeah, but that's the retail cost. What is their actual cost in that?
Yeah, there is. There's probably about $1,000.
Right.
And as well, a principle which is we're discounting a $10,000 product to $1,000.
Well, you're not. All I'm trying to do is move the risk so that it's post evidence,
right,
rather than pre evidence.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, cool.
So rather than saying, hey, pay the money now and we'll run the study.
Okay.
How about we run the study, you see what happens, and then you pay the money, and then let's go from there.
Okay, so that's a really interesting point. Okay, well, the cost of travel, that's it.
Plus cost of travel. So they've got about $1,000 in there, and then you've got the cost of travel. So, it's giving them the hole to poke their finger through is this thing in here. We want them to, there's nothing more powerful than running it on themselves and then having them see it.
Yeah.
And so what you want to be sure about is what the power of that review is going to be like. So when you do it, you want to know that you're going to be walking back at that review with corporate comms and investor relations at Rio going, are you serious? What the hell just happened? What would happen? What will they get at the end of that 30, when you've done the study and you're about to ask them for the 35K US, what are they going to be looking at?
Okay, what they're going to be looking at is a landscape of all of the key narratives that are going on for that organisation at the moment, which is 100 narratives. So they'll have a complete landscape. They're going to be looking, and that's going to give them the power of each of those narratives, the media that's underpinning them, the affect, which is the predictive emotion around each of those narratives, and give them really all of the tools and diagnostics and analyses that they currently don't have, and in a report. So that's what it's going to do.
Yeah.
It's actually their base case today. It would be their base case today. So that's using the tool for that. So that's one thing that we're going to do. The second thing we'll do is we'll say, here is a heat map which shows where they're applying best practice or leading what I would call emergent best practice, fully, partially, or not at all. And what the value would be to them of applying best practice through the kinds of tools that we're using here. And that should be fairly self-evident by then. But, what does that then mean?
And that's all going to happen in the 35K.
Yeah.
And then obviously to get this stuff, they've got to sign up for more and roll on.
Yeah, if they want us to continue to work with them, there would be a number of, because what we would do is identify potential use cases for them in this assessment that would be relevant to their situation, issue, and problem.
So part of what's in the back of my mind is I knew a guy quite a few years ago who's very successful in selling marketing services to companies. Super high conversion rate, like in the 90%.
Right.
Cold calling.
Cold calling.
Mm-hmm. But before he ever approached a company, this is years ago, he'd gather every bit of marketing collateral they had out in the marketplace. Television ads, newspaper ads, so screenshots off the TV, any kind of media, all their brochures, blah, 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 their website. And then he'd do the same for their two nearest competitors.
Yeah.
And he put them together with improvements that he could make in all of them.
Right.
And he'd print that in about a 45-page glossy book.
Right.
So it'd take him about a month to pull the data together and then put it all into the book, and then he'd get the book printed. Of course, he had a format for that and everything. There was only ever one copy of the book printed. And he'd literally walk into the one that he most wanted as a client. And he's basically saying to them, pay me $150,000 a year and I'll do all your marketing.
Right.
He would literally walk into the one that he'd want as a client. And he'd say, I've done a review of all of your marketing and I've done a comparative review of your two nearest competitors. I'd love to go through that with you.
Yeah.
And, most of the time they'd want to sit down and have a look at it straight away because he'd flick through, he'd riffle through the book. So he'd sit down and take them through the book in some detail all the time, holding the book. He didn't have slides or anything.
Oh.
At the end, he'd say, so look, here's the thing. I am selling my services to one of the three companies in this book, but I've come to you first.
Yep.
And they said, can we have a copy of the book to review it? And he goes, no, this is the only one. The book comes with me.
Yep.
Think about it. Let me know what you want to do.
Yep.
And walk out. Now, he was really good at what he did. So it was very obvious with the changes he made that whoever used his marketing tactics was going to smash it. And everyone bought, of course. And I'm not suggesting you do it quite so aggressively, but what he did was he gave them the holes to poke their fingers through to go, okay, you really were crucified. We get the evidence, we can see it. And it's almost like, can we shift the risk? So long as the review of that $35,000 piece of work is, is going to arrive at a point. So what you might do is you say, listen, why don't we do this piece of work for you? Here's what it's going to give you the capacity to do. So frame this stuff up as benefits.
Yeah.
And say, when we get to that point, I'm going to ask you to rate the value of that on a scale. Come up with a scale. I'm going to ask you to rate the value of what we put in front of you on a scale. And if it's 7 and above, I'm going to ask you to pay the $35,000. If it's 8 and above, we should be talking about what you do next with us.
Yeah.
And if it's below 7, I'm going to thank you very much for engaging in the process with me. It's obviously not right for you, and I'll continue to talk to other mining companies.
Yeah.
And so you're pre-framing how we're going to review this when we get there, so that they know that this line means that's fine, I'll continue talking to other companies, or we'll pay you and take it, or no, look, we need more of this. And they're the three choices. They're the three decision points anyway.
Yeah.
But are you pretty confident that this line, once they see it, that's not really going to be an option for them?
Oh, I think once they see it, they'll just be absolutely gobsmacked, because I was the first time I saw it. I just went, holy fuck.
So they're at minimum going to pay you the 35K.
The minimum.
And they're more likely to want to go, no, we need to move forward.
If I was them, I mean, they would, because what we can glean out of it is so profound. I mean, it's so much information. It's basically, it's overload of information. And that's kind of the other part of it, is once they get it, it would be so, in one sense, overwhelming. But what we can do, as you've just, I think, beautifully illustrated, you know, to distill out of that, what would be the 5, 10, 15 different recommendations that we would make for them, for example, around, you know, I mean, it could be any which way. But you know what? What it would be is really, it's really the first, it is what it says. It's helping them overcome the risk that they have got around what this could be.
So if you're talking to the investor relations and corporate comms specialists in the company, you've got the ability to equip them with recommendations they can bet their reputation on.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to equip you with such insightful data that you can go to the CEO and go, this is exactly what's happening. Here's what we need to do.
Yeah.
That's powerful. You know, that's because truth is, investor relations managers and corporate communications managers don't love the company. They love their job. And they want to look good. And they look good by making the company look good and the share price right.
That's right. That's right.
When does the AGM round start?
Oh, well.
It's interesting to me. I had a CEO of a mining company once. He said to me, you know, just before the AGM round, hey, Simon, how would I get a copy of the board, the chair reports and the CEO reports of the top 50 mining companies before I write my own report? And I went, that's really interesting. I can get you all of the reports from last year. I can only get you the reports for the ones that have already been given, because they're all on public record.
Sure.
But the thought that it sparked is, would the chair of a company and the CEO of a company write a markedly different report for the AGM round if they had this data?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess one of the things that, see, if you were to, can I just get back the use of the screen again?
Yep. And while you're connecting the screen, would a company write or include some different content in the annual general report itself with access to this kind of information?
I mean, you know that in my past life I was an auditor.
Yeah.
I'm a chartered accountant, so I started my life as a person who, you know, was auditing financial statements. That's what I started my life doing. So what's kind of ironic about this whole thing is that I'm coming back to this part of my life, which has pretty much disappeared for most of it. But what you see here on the left-hand side is, see where it says emotions can drive price changes?
Yeah.
So what we're saying here is that at any moment in time over this 66-day period, there is a predominant emotion associated with that company.
Right.
Okay? And we're graphing next to that emotion, we're graphing the share price. And what we start to see are correlations between the behavior of the share price and certain emotions.
Yeah, right.
So yes, when it comes to, in this particular case, expectation, and expectation is often a key driver, we can see that that has a dramatic effect on their particular share price. And we're measuring it. We're measuring it. And so that's, I guess, the first, that's the one on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, again, we've got over here, you'll look at some of the lead up to some of the lifts where there's calmness and there's hope and surprise as leading up to some of their big lifts. And what's really interesting about this is machine learning helps us to identify and predict the likelihood of that. So if you, in the first instance, say, okay, let's just take this one where we say emotions and share price have a relationship. The next thing we can do, and this is kind of the first step in, yes, we can do landscapes, but landscapes are great to understand because what they will do is help you identify which elements in the media underneath in the market are actually driving with the most power the emotion.
Yeah.
So the next thing you want to do after that is say, well, if we know what's driving the emotion, then what can we do in terms of prediction of potential share shifts and changes up and down? So to what extent is it possible to combine the measurement and understanding of measurement of emotion and its correlation with share price, and then use that as a predictor of expected future changes upwards and downwards? And that's where we're at the moment. And we're running a fund at the moment, which is running a notional fund, which is running a very significant value uplift on the back of the testing we're doing around this. So we're, in terms of what we think a large CFO would be wanting to do is not just do this on their own company so they understand what the future potential behavior is of the share, but then if they can see that it's coming towards something negative, that they can start to think about, well, how can we frame some of the messages in a way which is potentially going to create an emotion we know is going to be less painful for us because we understand what the emotion is that drives a lower drop in our price. So we start to understand really not market manipulation, but we're understanding the extent to which the market is responding to what we're putting into the market.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Does this make any sense?
Yeah, it does. You know what keeps popping into my mind? I'm not too sure how to draw it at the moment, but you're almost introducing. Excuse me. You're almost introducing I don't know how many more actually, but you're introducing some new corporate measures. So share price is a corporate measure.
Yeah.
But emotional value is a corporate measure.
Yeah. Associated with every single company in the market, and we measure that. Yeah.
So, if you were able to say to the investor relations people, the three key measures for your company are share price, of course, market emotional value, and I'm just wondering what else would come out of those graphs you've just shown me. And we can capture data that allows you to be predictive and nurture the narrative on those measures for the company. So at any point in time, whatever the thing is that you're doing, the investor, the AGM round, speaking to staff, we can provide you with predictive data, predictive analysis, if you like.
Well, what we're providing you with is predictive data, and based on that predictive data, we're giving you the messaging we believe is going to build the right narrative for us at this point in time.
Yeah.
In your boardroom, in your annual general meeting, in your presentation to investors, in your interview with ABC, CBS, Yahoo Finance, blah, 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 blah.
So here's my concern with what you just put in front of me from a sales point of view, if I keep coming back to sales.
Sure.
As long as that's someone else's data, it's easy for me to sit there and kind of look and go, I kind of get it. But if I've got little questions in my mind that would have taken me deeper, I may not ask them because it's somebody else's data. But if it's our data,
yeah,
I'm going to want to know what every one of those color bands mean.
Yeah.
And what would we have done about it? So I really think you need to get to that 35K product with their data as a part of the sales process. Now let's come back and look at the first landscape we do for you.
So what you're saying is actually, because what I just showed you is something that we've got kind of in skunkworks at the moment, which is, literally following a company but what you're saying is true. What we should be doing is, true. It's another way of doing it by saying we will track 10 companies and then we'll go to those 10 companies and
show them their data
and present them the results
of their data.
Yeah.
So when you're in the sales process, because here's the underlying sales issue of what you've just taken me through. It started to drop into the technical, right?
Sure.
And the technical is as complex or more than the concept.
It's fucking hard, yeah.
And if it's not personally related to me, now I'm starting to glaze over.
Yeah.
And I go, I get it. I get it. But all right, then I'll have to think about it. But if it's personally related to me, for a start, I'm going to give you more time to understand what it's telling me because it's about me. And I want to know a bit more about how you arrived at that.
Sure.
Whereas if it's somebody else's data and I'm not too sure at how you arrived at that, I can leave that unanswered because it doesn't really bother me.
So my partner in Tokyo would say, what you need is a emotionally compelling example for you of what this is all about, and then you'll just leap over to buying it for yourself. I don't agree with that. I actually think what you're saying is more powerful.
Yeah, one of the most emotionally powerful thing is if it's about them. It's
let's just put the price up to 75 and do it for 75.
And shift the risk point for them, shift the moment of risk.
Yeah.
The moment people talk about risk reversal in sales, the issue is the moment of risk. Shift the moment of risk. So the moment of risk for them is going to come after you show them the landscape.
Yeah.
But they don't get to keep the landscape if they don't want to pay. You walk away with it. We're showing you everything here. We talked about how we'd score this before we did it. Where would you place that on that continuum? Is it 7 and above? Is that data valuable to you right now? And if they go, oh, look, we don't know if we do that, that's great. Thanks very much. We'll take that with us. Away we go. Obviously, we will continue to monitor your company because you're in a market with other people who could become clients of ours. Happy that, really appreciative that you gave us the time. That's a troubling thought. That you've just shown me all this stuff. You're going to continue to monitor us because you are going to make this available to other companies in the same market. And because we're not making a $75,000 decision, this goes no further. That's a troubling thought.
Well, we're actually going to bring it over to your competitor.
But that's what you're saying by saying, look, we are offering this to companies in the marketplace. We're not going to do it with every company. We'll only be doing it with the ones that see the power of it. Obviously, we're monitoring the entire landscape of all the companies all the time. We're just showing you what we've got on you already.
Yeah.
Can you do it retrospectively? So could you do one for Rio?
I can't do it retrospectively. If we, for example, if we were to do what I just showed you with the emotions, I have to make a commitment today to go and start something. And actually, what's really interesting is, I guess what we need to do then as Riskloop and Six Systems is make a call on whether we can actually just start it up for 10 companies, the top 10 companies in the world, and just have a go.
I think that's a worthwhile strategic conversation to have. And
actually, what's even better about it is we could use that as input to the book.
And, that's a far more, just think about how much more compelling that is. We've already been tracking you.
Yeah.
And so, what's the evidence here? The evidence is we can track you.
We'll tell you more about yourself than you know today.
Correct. We can track you.
After we've shown them that this is what is going on here, this is what's going on here. Well, you say you're conventional. Well, we're not.
Are you? Yeah.
We're predictive. We've got the tools that can do it. We'll share them with you if you're interested, but we'll show you exactly.
Yeah, we are showing you the intel gap.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Now imagine in the,
fucking full on. Yeah. No, that's
imagine in that very first conversation when you're doing the Riskloop model.
Yeah.
You talk about the intel gap.
Yeah.
You say to them, by the end of our meeting today, I will be showing you the live data of your own actual intel gap. I'll be giving you an example of that. Because we've been, we're tracking companies all the time on this.
Yep.
I can show you what that's going to look like. And the way to get into this is, we've made a conscious choice to shift the moment of risk for you, so that you can at least view it in its full form, as if you were going to use it, and if that makes sense to you. The cost of the landscape is 75, and then the ongoing engagement is X. We don't believe your moment of risk should be before you get to see it. This is such a transformational way of having a level of power over the narrative that it's difficult for people to get it. It's unreasonable for us to expect people to pay for it up front. And so we've taken the responsibility of shifting the moment of risk and showing it to you, on your company, so that you can see what it could do for you. I think as a sales flow, that makes more sense, because the issue is it is a transformational concept, and my concern is as soon as you start talking about what the narratives look like and things like that, if it's not about them, it's too easy for them to start to drift and lose focus. Because now you're putting graphs in front of me about other companies or something, and okay, I get it, they look interesting.
But that's exactly the problem we have today. I mean, people are, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, because it's not about them.
No, it's not about them. But I went to Westpac the other day, and Westpac's feedback to me was, and coming from somebody in IT and somebody who's in customer experience, that's, what was what was his feedback? His feedback was something like, What was it again, Rob? Feedback from the marketing meeting was that Riskloop is not differentiating enough from current Westpac capability, and given current change restrictions, are not looking to move forward at this time.
What is Westpac's current capability?
Well, that's a good question. They think that they've got capability which does what we've done. We shared with them a single narrative, not 100, but a single narrative, which was Westpac Banking Royal Commission. And it showed it to be a timeless, which is powerful narrative that's disgusted and very negative. And basically said, look, guys, if you don't address this head on, then you're going to have some significant issues around that. And they went, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And we're talking to somebody, we're talking to the guy who's the head of customer experience, and he goes, oh, fuck, I just don't need to know that today. I got enough on my plate. Can you just go somewhere else? I think the CEO might have had a different view, and I think the head of IR might have a different view, and I think the chair would have a different view. We're not talking to the guy.
There's no question you'd want to get to the CEO, and the head of the CEO and chair for sure, and the head of investor relations, and then at an appropriate time the CFO, because the CEO will almost certainly want to involve the CFO at some point.
Yeah. So coming back though, I mean, from our perspective, it's a big investment of time and money to go and, for example, that 60-day summary I showed you before.
Yeah.
That would be, relatively speaking, that doesn't cost that much time and money to do. That's a second to get the machines to do that for us. 100 narratives though, 100 narratives for a landscape, the only way you can do that is by consulting with the organisation to do it. You can't do it without getting their input to it, because in fact what you're doing is you're bringing a listening ear to what the stories are that are going on within the organisation that they've got concerns and issues and worries about, and then you're converting those into narratives and putting them into the landscape. So, but this one, which is the one that I just showed you on the screen, this one is actually one we could run, but it's not. If we're running it just on its own, it's not giving us a lot of depth because we don't have a landscape running alongside of it, which, but it is about the emotions that are driving the organisation in the marketplace, and the extent to which they may or may not want to know about that. Well, who knows?
Could you, could you, if you were looking at a company,
yeah,
could you pick the narratives that they might be worried about by what you're seeing in the public arena, and run without doing the consulting work, run the landscape on those, and then as a part of the sales process say to them, look, because we haven't consulted with you yet, which is a part of the service,
yeah,
we're not sure what the narratives are that are the highest priority for you right now. But these are some narratives that we picked up about your company in the marketplace, and we've run the landscapes on those so you can see what the system does for you. Now, of course, if the things that are critical to you right now are different to those, of course, the narratives would run on them. But we of course don't know that without consulting to you.
Correct. And look, I think the first time I've kind of had that sort of conversation was with Westpac. I haven't been in front of enough companies to actually have that kind of conversation, but that's probably a handful. It's maybe 1, 2, or 3. And if it was the banks, I'd be going AMP, Banking Royal Commission, ANZ, Banking Royal Commission, Westpac, Banking Royal Commission, etc., just to give them a taste or a feel. If it's Rio, I showed them, or I want to show them Adani and stop Adani, and show them the power of a positive, what is essentially a timeless branding narrative in Adani, and a timeless negative, powerful narrative in stop Adani. And unless Adani does something about that, they're in gridlock.
Yeah.
They're never going to get that up.
So I think the stumbling block for me from a sales perspective is this, conceptually all the way through on the conversation that we've had so far today, which has come out of you going out and testing in the market. The Riskloop model first totally makes sense. Into the bell curve absolutely makes sense. This is what it's about. New version of the iceberg makes sense. Here's how it works. Bell curve. Genius model. The longer you leave it, the wider the gap will become. The for futures model. And what are you selling at the end? Now, it's really valuable to have a clear sense of what you're selling at the end. And so if it's that 35 or 75K, let's do this, but we want to shift the moment of risk for you, is one way. Or you go in with one that you've already done prior to engage with them to walk them through it. The problem, and both of those things are kind of where my mind is at, because as soon as you get past that conceptual level and you start saying, okay, let's look at what this looks like, it starts to get into the technical. And I think that's where they disengage, and they are trying to rationalize that they've already got what they need.
Exactly.
And whatever you put in front of them needs to show them that they don't have it at all. And that's why it needs to be about them. And and that's probably why it needs to be a landscape. That graph that you just showed me before, if it doesn't have the same depth, might allow them to say, oh, we can gather that sort of data, like Westpac did. Well, let's not, excuse me again. Let's not react to a sample of one.
No.
The Westpac people, see, one of the issues you're going to have is you will probably be making some internal people look a bit silly. So, you just may have hit that natural block in selling to a corporate at Westpac, because the customer relations manager is a part of what's already caused what they've got.
Exactly, part of the machine. And look, I no hard feelings, but that's completely okay, But it doesn't help me to.
So it's getting to the CEO. And probably to the most senior investor relations person. I have you ever put this in front of the Institute of Company Directors?
No.
It would be interesting to go and have a conversation with them about it.
Yeah.
Particularly if, I'm not sure how they would. I mean, I don't know that they'd want that they'd need to. I'm just not sure how they would use it, but you almost want a network of CEOs and others to know that this sort of stuff is available for them to be almost reaching out to you.
I'm currently, as I said, writing a book, which is called Market Power, which is essentially to start to put it out there and find out who is, if you like, who's drawn towards the light rather than repulsed by it.
Yeah.
So that's one part. Another part I've done is I've put it out there to become. I've made an application for Unearth's next accelerator based in Queensland, which is specifically focused on the resource sector. Because one of the things they're offering is door opening by large companies into in the same way that Rio's offered me that last week. But then I'm going to get to this point, which is the point that we're discussing now, which is, well, unless it's about me, am I prepared to pay?
Mm.
And what we do at Whittle, which is the other company I've got, which we do this same thing, this strategic assessment, where we go in and we say, because everyone says to us at Whittle, oh, we already do that optimization. Yes, we already do that. We already do that. And we come in and we say, actually, we've gone and looked at it and we say, you do this and this, but you don't do this, and this. And because you don't do those things, you miss the chance to be able to do what we can do because we do them all. And essentially what I wanted to do is a very similar approach in this, where I say, look, we'll show you what you're doing, which is this and this, but you're not doing this, and this. And here's what happens when you do. And they go, oh, right, so you can do that. Yep, you can do that. So that's the way it's not quite what you're suggesting, which is giving them something straight up, which says what they've done. It's saying, look, we trust what we can do is pretty bloody good, and we know it's pretty good. And, we'll be able to benchmark you against what we think is emergent best practice and show what the differences are, because you probably think you're doing it already, and that's fine. We'll share with you where we think you can do, perhaps a lot better, and there's more opportunity. And when you do all those things combined together, you get a huge uplift, and this is what it looks like.
Have Six Systems got a paying client in another country?
Yeah, quite a few, but mostly in marketing. So, and they're mostly in Southeast Asia, Japan, Singapore, and mostly marketing people. So the marketing people love it, but then it's not yet got to the CMO level, CFO level. It's at the moment, it's underneath that. It needs to go up a level.
And are those clients getting all the landscapes and everything else and using it to nurture the narrative?
They are.
Or are they using it to shape marketing?
They're using it to shape marketing, but they're also doing, for example, one of the things we can do is driver analysis, and driver analysis is really good for positioning your product in a market. So we've got 4 competitors in a market: Telstra, Vodafone, Optus, mobile plan. So we can tell you why, if you're Vodafone, first of all, we'll tell you what the key attributes are within the market that people use to make preference and choose who, and then we'll tell you how well you're doing against everybody else. So we can do it in any product, in any market. And for that sort of driver analysis, it's used a lot.
And is there a reason why you're not selling that?
I don't have a natural affinity with marketing. Marketing's not my natural space. I'm not an ex-advertising guy. John is ex-advertising, the guy who designed the system. He's actually a physicist, but he worked in advertising for a long time as a strategist. So a lot of the guys that are involved in this have been involved in advertising. I'm not. I come from this accounting, mining kind of background. So for me, I've been kind of looking for what is my natural fit into this.
Right.
My natural fit is much more, I believe, around strategy, and then strategy in what sense, where marketing's not really my thing.
But they don't have, so Six Systems don't have a client that's using this at that investor relations nurturing the narrative level.
No.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that is a problem, and that's what I'm trying to figure out how to.
So do you need to go to a mid-tier mining company where the CEO is much more accessible? They are absolutely, my experience with the smaller mining companies that I deal with.
Yeah.
Mid-tier and below, is they are much more vulnerable to share price and market opinion.
Yeah.
They're very vulnerable to the institutional investors' view of them.
Mm.
Their bank their banking relationships are affected by institutional investor views of them. And they don't have the same horsepower inside their organisation as the larger companies do. And often the investor relations person's a much lower level. And I wonder if you need to go to a smaller mining company or mid-tier company and get them on as a client. But the buying process isn't going to be as, for a start, there's not going to be as many fingers in the pie. And there's a fair chance you'll get to meet the CEO.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've thought about that, Simon, and I actually, the only downside is, and this is a downside, is that for a smaller company, relatively speaking, that's more thinly traded, doesn't have as much market presence, as it were. We, quite frankly, in the mining sector, there's not going to be as many that are going to show up as having a narrative at all. The narrative is going to be shown to be weak. And you know, I can tell you that now for quite a few of them. Maybe not Evolution Gold, for example, or a couple of them. Great client. I mean, I know quite a few of them as well. But I've gone for the ones that would have the greatest benefit. Really are the ones who are the maybe top 10, top 50, top 100 miners, rather than the smaller ones.
So what mining company is at number 100 at the moment on the ASX?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think of it. I'd be able to figure that out. I wonder if you need to go to a mark or a target that, you know, that where you'll have a greater, a greater capacity to get to the CEO. Yeah.
Where there's still a narrative. So rather than going to the top 50 or the top 100 and starting at one working down, you start at 100 and work up, or 50 and work up. Only for two or three of them.
Yeah, no, it's a really good suggestion. In fact, I just bumped into the other day a good mate of mine who's an analyst who publishes a league table of all of lithium, gold, silver, you know, iron ore, etc. And he lists essentially all the top Australian companies in that particular mineral, and what he shows in his analysis is, you know, the top to the bottom, and what might be useful. I mean, he made the suggestion over 100 mil market cap. Maybe it's over 250 mil or $500 million, but it's probably around that space.
Yeah. But
you know, yeah, I think there's something to be said about that as a start there and work up. Yeah.
Well, you know, I did a lot of work with an iron ore company that was 50 mil market cap, and then inside 4 years was 500 mil market cap.
Yeah. And
then sold at 500, and BCI and bought them. You know, BCI is struggling to be a 500 mil market cap. They're probably at about 200 mil. There's a lot of market conversation about BCI and all the time. BCI, and it's an iron ore company in Perth, and big chunk of Chinese ownership and things like that. But the point is that 100 mil market cap and above, you know, they're all actually, what's interesting is what's just bubbling up for me at the moment in this conversation. You know, I'm familiar with BHP, less familiar with Rio, but quite familiar with BHP. You know, familiar with Newcrest Gold. I'm not sure that the bigger companies care that much, to be honest. You know, about the narrative at a certain level. I think they kind of go, you know,
except when shit hits the fan and they have a Samarco take place, for example, at BHP.
Correct. But I think on a sustained, ongoing basis, I'm not sure that it's how they think. No. But But I know that the CEOs of the smaller mid-tier companies, probably 100 million to 500 million market cap, are always thinking about what's the market think about us.
Totally. And in fact, this year's been a classic example. Markets dropped on most of them by 50 to 80%.
Yeah. And so every day they're thinking about what they need to communicate to the market.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not sure that the big companies are in the same space unless there's a disaster.
No, you're right.
So
look, what you've just said reiterates actually a view I've got. So you're absolutely, I'm completely aligned with what you're saying. And in fact, it's only in the last 2 weeks that I've actually started to consider that marketing probably isn't my space. I should be looking at other spaces, of which IR is, I think, kind of the natural place, but it's really the CEO, the CFO, and the chair. And IR happens to be the bag carrier.
And if you were saying to them, think about how you could use this in 2 ways, and this would really only apply to the mid-tier companies that are daily thinking about what they're communicating. 2 natural outcomes out of this is this will allow you to construct a regular and consistent market communication strategy. It will allow you to construct a regular and consistent market comm strategy that will nurture the right narrative. That's the first thing it's going to do. The second thing it's going to do, in the case of an event, probably a disaster or something negative, you will know what to say. So consistently positioned to know the right thing to say if something happens, but also consistently shaping the market with messaging that is going to nurture the right narrative rather than guessing. And the truth is, those mid-tier companies are gut feeling their way all the way through this.
Totally gut feeling. Yeah, totally.
Let's not gut feel through it anymore. Let's data our way through it. Let's rather than gut feel our way through it.
What you just said, Simon, I think is, let's put market power in your hands so that you can, based on the evidence, know whether you're actually making an impact or not, because we can see that, we can read it, we can check it out.
Let's put the actual market power in your hands.
Are you drawing on?
No, I'm making notes so that it's in the PDF when I send it through to you. I'm just making notes of things that we're saying. Let's put the actual market. I'll share it so you can see it, but I'm just making notes. Come on. So let's put the actual market power in your hands that the big companies think they have. That's an interesting position. So if you imagine the top 15, 1 through to 15, 15 through to 50, 50 through to 100, and you find a sweet spot in here somewhere, and you go, because they are affected by the narrative, they want to control it, but you're actually going to them saying, you know what? We're fascinated by the internet. We're much more interested in reality. The people that can most benefit from nurturing the narratives are the ones that can use the narrative to move themselves up the level, rather than those that are using the narrative to just defend. So you go to the you go to the 1, 2, and 3. All they're doing is using the narrative to defend. 20 through to 75 can use the narrative to grow. And let's put the actual market power in your hands that the big companies think they have. And actually, you could actually draw that graph for them. You know, why am I talking to you? Well, the big companies can only and will only use this to defend themselves. We're much more interested, which is a red line activity, defend themselves from falling. We're much more interested in the companies that want to grow.
Yep.
You know, we want to put the narrative to good use. You know, I just think it's a strategy, and you'll get to the CEOs more readily.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Listen, what you're saying is actually making a shit ton of sense to me, because I've got, as I say, I've got this application at the moment to become part of the Unearthed, which Unearthed is one of the innovative, you know, startups in Perth that runs accelerators. What's really interesting about your suggested positioning here, and I think you've articulated it in a much clearer way than I've had it so far in my own head, is it's doable. It's not crazy.
No.
Would you still go for the same approach of the, you know, the pay us, you know, 55 or 75, whatever it is, for, you know, for doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, I would, but it's a different kind of conversation. When you bring the narrative back, you can focus the narrative on what they could do to grow.
Yeah, sure.
Which is a much more exciting conversation.
Well, it is. And, you know, the other thing is and that's what we were discussing internally, me and my mate in Tokyo, is what we can do is actually benchmark them against what the other companies in their segment or category are doing it around the same size or bigger, and help them to understand how they're actually leveraging, you know, how much power they've got at the moment within their narrative, and those with power and those without, and where they're getting their power from, and which sources.
Yeah, totally. So it's finding the power to grow.
Power to grow.
Which is a much more exciting conversation for someone to be having. You know, what you experienced at Westpac was this red zone conversation.
Yeah.
And the dude's going, that's just not an exciting conversation to take to my CEO. Let's spend this money just to defend ourselves. Whereas you go to a mid-tier in, say, mining, and you're going, you know, we all know that market cap is growth. And, you know, we can give you access to, you know, the power of nurturing the narrative as a key strategic plank, you know, to growing your market cap. The other thing is, so I'd still use the same approach, but you're coming back with a much more positive message. You know, we want to shift the point of, we want to shift the moment of risk for you. You know, we know that working with companies of this size, we need to show you what we can do first. You know, it's the nature of this of where we are in the list. So we want to show you what we can do first. We want to shift the moment of risk. You know, with your permission, we'll come back with a narrative. We're going to have to ask you some questions and get some insights from you to do that right. Now, you might have run one on a couple of companies, let's say Rio and BHP, just by what you see in the market, right? And you might put this in front of them, you know, with no names on it, although they'll know who you're talking about, but you do the appropriate, you know, the appropriate governance thing, if you like, or integrity thing. You take all identification off, and you go, but, you know, let's show you what a narrative looks like of someone in your space who, because of where they're at, could only ever use this to defend themselves. So you have some sense of what we're talking about, but what we'd love to do is run the narrative on you with insights from internal, and come back and show you what that looks like and show you how that can help you nurture the narrative for growth. So because there's actually two, you're nurturing the narrative for one of two reasons: growth or defense.
Yeah, exactly.
And growth is a much more it's a much more interesting conversation for people to get involved in.
Yeah.
And the internal officers, if that's the highest level we can get to, that's a better thing for them to take forward in the company.
Yeah.
Let's get this data so that we can really put together. We have the actual market power in our hands that big companies think they've got, but probably don't realise they don't have.
Well, that's certainly the case. So I'm busting to go to the toilet, mate. I've really.
I am also monitoring my time in terms of my next call as well.
So you're probably
so what you I was going to suggest two things. One is what you send back to Rio, and I think today's conversation might shape some of that as well. I would include some of this kind of thinking in the thing back to Rio.
Yeah,
I'd put a few little notes together, and I'd make them the offer of shifting the moment of risk. Here's what I suggest we do next. And see what they do. Or here's where we could get to with this. Why don't we have the meeting with the investor relations person?
Yep.
If you wanted to send through to me what you're sending to them for me to have a look at, that'd be fine. So a critique of the Rio stuff. The second thing is for you to think your way through mid-tier strategy. Yeah. I just listening to the experience you're having with Rio and with Westpac and stuff, a mid-tier strategy from a market and sales point of view makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. No, I can hear what you're saying.
Changes the dynamic entirely.
Yeah, no, I get it. I really... Yeah, I mean, it's... no, in fact, we tried... And look, I've got a funny relationship with this. So in Holland, when I was part of PwC, what I did with PwC was I got all the tier ones because that was our clientele.
Yeah.
So, and I'm so used to working with them. I'm not so used to working with the mid tiers. But when we started to get into the Whittle stuff, we had to change to a mid tier strategy, and that's what we did at Whittle. But I just know that once you're in the big guys, they just go forever. It's once you're in, and it goes forever.
Yeah. It does, but it was also PwC.
I know.
And PwC as a brand goes forever. The big guys as well.
Yeah.
But they're becoming more cynical, the big guys. The other thing is the smaller or the mid-tier ones value the relationship much more.
Yeah, sure.
And then the other thing that happens with the mid-tiers, the CEOs that move take you with them to the next company.
True.
So if you build enough connections into the company while they're there, when the CEO or the CFO or others move, they bring you with them.
Yeah.
So there's tons of upsides and downsides in both. But the fact is you don't have that investor market case study yet.
No.
To go to the big tier ones and go, you guys should just do this. So you don't have the PwC data set, if you like.
No, I don't.
PwC just walks in with.
Yeah.
So I feel like a mid-tier strategy now that you've talked to me about the exchange with Rio, I'd still go back to them definitely, and with that tweak of shifting the moment of risk for them and putting an option in front of them. But I'd be really interested for you to think about a mid-tier strategy and let me know what you think out of that. I think we definitely changed the value model. I'm totally fine with the changes to the 4 futures model. I think they're good changes. The circles above the bell curve are great.
Yeah.
So it's the models themselves. I think make sense, and it's really strategy now in terms of this mid-tier strategy.
I think you're really right. I also think that we probably, for the time being anyway, I think I have got everything I need from you for the time being. I need to probably just sort of take a pause here to understand and let this digest and drop into its different bits. But
Totally.
I think I need to digest this, which is what I'm trying to do at the moment with a whole bunch of other stuff. But you know what? You've been so incredibly helpful, Simon. Oh my God. I cannot thank you enough for just your kind attention and just the way in which you've been able to assist me to just bring this together in a way that I hadn't been able to articulate. And it's been incredibly, really, really helpful.
Well, it's been my pleasure. It's an amazing thing you're trying, you guys have got. So, and really unique. So it needs to get out into the market, doesn't it?
I'm mad enough to try.
Yeah. It's going to happen. It's just a matter. It is really just where's the tip of the wedge.
I know. But I got to have a story to tell that connects, and it's evolving, and I really appreciate your assistance in shaping it. It's been really,
absolutely.
I'll flick you something to send that I'm going to want to send to Rio this afternoon, so that we can. If you could flick me that PDF that you've just been drawing.
Right. I'll do that, and you've got the recording of this, and as you think through that mid-tier thing, just let me know your thoughts. If anything, if anything obvious pops out, I can let you know. All right. Keep me informed.
I will. You will be. I'll keep you informed.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks,
See you, mate. Bye.